This week on Heestorian, Episode 1, was Judas Iscariot an angel?
Once upon a time, there was a man named Judas Iscariot who is one of the most infamous figures in the Bible. He is known for his betrayal of Jesus Christ, which led to his arrest, trial, and crucifixion. However, there are also some people who believe that Judas was an angel. The idea that Judas could have been an angel comes from non-biblical folklore and apocryphal writings. According to these stories, Judas was either a fallen angel or an angel sent on a mission to betray Jesus as part of a divine plan. This theory has been debated by biblical scholars for centuries. Some believe that Judas was simply a human being who made a grave mistake, while others argue that there is evidence to support the idea that he was an angel. Some point to the fact that Judas seems to have known that he was going to betray Jesus, suggesting that he was acting on a divine plan. Others argue that he showed remorse for his actions, which could be seen as evidence that he was not entirely responsible for what happened. One of the key arguments for the idea that Judas was an angel is that angels are often seen as messengers of God. This could mean that Judas was sent to earth to complete a specific task, which in this case, was to betray Jesus. However, there are also many arguments against the idea that Judas was an angel. For example, angels are typically portrayed as obedient servants of God who always act in accordance with his will, whereas Judas seems to have acted out of his own self-interest. Furthermore, the Bible makes no mention of Judas being an angel, and mainstream Christian denominations do not accept the idea. Regardless of whether or not Judas was an angel, his story serves as a cautionary tale about the dangers of greed and betrayal. Even if he was acting on a divine plan, he still made a choice that had devastating consequences. While most people believe that Judas was a human being who betrayed Jesus Christ, there are some who argue that he was not a human being at all. According to this theory, Judas was actually a demon or some other supernatural entity that took on a human form in order to carry out its mission. The idea is that Judas was sent by Satan to undermine Jesus' mission and prevent the redemption of humanity. Proponents of this theory point to a few different pieces of evidence to support their argument. Firstly, they note that Judas is never referred to as human or man in the Bible. Instead, he is simply called Judas, which they argue suggests that he was not a normal human being. Furthermore, they point to the fact that Judas is described as a thief in the Bible, which they argue is more consistent with the behavior of a demon than a human being. They also note that Judas is said to have hung himself after betraying Jesus, which is often seen as a sign of demonic possession. Finally, they suggest that Judas' betrayal of Jesus was not motivated by greed or a desire for personal gain, but rather by a desire to thwart God's plan. They argue that this is more consistent with the actions of a demon than a human being. Of course, this theory is highly controversial, and there is little evidence to support it. Most scholars agree that Judas was indeed a human being, albeit one who made a terrible mistake. Nevertheless, the idea of Judas as a non-human entity is an intriguing one, and it adds another layer of complexity to the already complex story of Jesus' betrayal and crucifixion. Whether or not one believes in this theory, the story of Judas will continue to inspire debate and speculation for many years to come. One of the most obvious bad traits that Judas possessed was greed. According to the Bible, Judas agreed to betray Jesus to the chief priests for 30 pieces of silver. This act of selling out his friend and teacher for money has been interpreted as a sign of his love for material possessions and his willingness to put them above his loyalty to Jesus. Another bad trait that Judas displayed was dishonesty. He lied to Jesus and the other apostles about his intentions, pretending to be a faithful disciple while secretly plotting against Jesus. This deception indicates a lack of integrity and shows that Judas was willing to manipulate others to achieve his goals. While Judas Iscariot is most remembered for his betrayal of Jesus Christ, there are some scholars and theologians who argue that he may have possessed some positive qualities as well. Here are a few potential good traits that have been attributed to Judas. Financial management skills. According to the Bible, Judas was trusted with the financial affairs of the apostles. This suggests that he may have had strong organizational and management skills, which were valuable in ensuring that the group's needs were met. Courage. Some theorists suggest that Judas' betrayal of Jesus was actually an act of courage, rather than cowardice or greed. They argue that he knew what he was doing was necessary to fulfill God's plan and bring about the redemption of humanity, even if it meant betraying his friend and teacher. Loyalty. Prior to his betrayal of Jesus, Judas was one of his most devoted followers. He spent years traveling with Jesus and supporting him in his teachings and miracles. While his ultimate actions were certainly disloyal, it is possible that Judas felt he was acting in the best interests of the group as a whole. Recognition of mistakes. After betraying Jesus, Judas realized the gravity of his actions and attempted to return the 30 pieces of silver to the chief priests. While this does not excuse his betrayal, it does show a willingness to take responsibility for his mistakes and try to make amends. Of course, it is important to remember that these potential good traits do not excuse Judas' ultimate betrayal of Jesus. However, they do serve as a reminder that even those who make grave mistakes can possess positive qualities as well. Judas also exhibited a lack of faith in Jesus and his teachings. Despite spending time with Jesus and witnessing his miracles, Judas still chose to betray him. This suggests that Judas may have been disillusioned with Jesus' message or felt that his own agenda was more important than following Jesus' lead. Judas is often considered to be an evil figure because he betrayed Jesus Christ, who is a central figure in Christianity. However, it is important to note that the story of Judas and his betrayal of Jesus is more complex than a simple case of good versus evil. There are different interpretations of Judas and his motivations for betraying Jesus, and some scholars have suggested that he may have been acting out of loyalty to a different vision of Judaism or as part of a larger plan orchestrated by God. Ultimately, whether or not Judas is considered evil depends on one's interpretation of his actions and their theological and moral perspective. Judas is a figure from the Christian Bible who is known for betraying Jesus Christ. It is not accurate to say that Judas has any power, as he is simply a historical figure and does not have any supernatural abilities or authority. However, his actions did have significant consequences in the Christian faith, as they led to Jesus being crucified and ultimately becoming the central figure of Christianity. Judas is often considered to be an evil disciple because he betrayed Jesus Christ, who is a central figure in Christianity. According to the Bible, Judas agreed to identify Jesus to the authorities by giving him a kiss, which led to Jesus being arrested and ultimately sentenced to death by crucifixion. This act of betrayal was seen as a grave offense against Jesus and his teachings. Moreover, Judas is often portrayed as being motivated by greed when he made the deal with the chief priests to betray Jesus for 30 pieces of silver. This further adds to the perception that he acted out of selfish motivations, rather than out of loyalty or love for Jesus. Overall, Judas' actions were seen as a violation of the trust that Jesus had placed in him as one of his closest disciples. For this reason, he is often viewed as a symbol of treachery, deceit, and moral failure in Christian theology and tradition. He was born into a poor family and grew up with his mother and father who were both hardworking farmers. Judas' parents instilled in him the values of honesty, loyalty, and hard work from a very young age. As a child, Judas was known for his intelligence and curiosity. He loved to ask questions and learn about the world around him. Despite his family's financial struggles, he was determined to get an education and make something of himself. When he was old enough, Judas began attending school in the nearby town. His teachers quickly recognized his talent and encouraged him to pursue higher education. However, as he grew older, Judas became increasingly interested in religion and spirituality. He spent much of his free time studying the scriptures and attending religious services at the local synagogue. His devotion to God and his faith became the center of his life, and he felt called to devote himself fully to serving the divine. As he approached adulthood, Judas decided that he wanted to dedicate his life to serving God by becoming a disciple of a rabbi. He traveled to Jerusalem, where he hoped to find a teacher who would accept him as a student. After exploring several different schools of thought, Judas eventually found himself drawn to the teachings of Jesus of Nazareth. He was inspired by Jesus' message of love, compassion, and forgiveness, and felt that this was the path that he was meant to follow. Judas joined the circle of Jesus' disciples and was soon welcomed into their inner circle. He became one of Jesus' closest confidants, known for his intelligence, wisdom, and insight. However, as time went on, Judas began to experience doubts and fears. He struggled with the idea that Jesus might not be the Messiah that he had hoped for, and worried that his faith was being misplaced. As these doubts grew, Judas began to distance himself from the other disciples. He felt isolated and alone, unsure of what to do with his conflicting emotions. One day, he was approached by a group of priests who offered him a large sum of money to help them capture Jesus. At first, Judas refused, but as his doubts continued to grow, he became more and more tempted by the offer. But what many people don't know is that Judas may have had some secrets of his own. It's believed that he may have been a member of a radical group called the Zealots, who were known for their violent resistance against Roman rule. Some historians speculate that Judas may have joined the group in hopes of overthrowing the Roman government and establishing a Jewish kingdom. Others suggest that Judas may have been motivated by greed. According to the Bible, he accepted 30 pieces of silver from the chief priests in exchange for betraying Jesus. Some scholars believe that this amount was equivalent to 4 months' wages, suggesting that Judas may have been struggling financially and saw this as an opportunity to make some quick money. However, there are also theories that suggest that Judas may not have actually betrayed Jesus at all. In the Gospel of Judas, a non-canonical text discovered in Egypt in the 1970s, Judas is portrayed as being a loyal disciple who was following Jesus' orders when he handed him over to the authorities. According to this version of events, Jesus wanted to be crucified so that he could fulfill his destiny as the savior of humanity. Regardless of the truth behind Judas' actions, his betrayal has had a profound impact on Christianity. The story of Judas serves as a reminder of the dangers of greed and the importance of loyalty and trust. It also highlights the complex nature of human relationships and the power of forgiveness.